everyone. I am Zana Kentish Brade. I am a recent Part 2 graduate from Nottingham Trent University. And my project is the People's Assembly, working together for a sustainable future. The brief was basically focused on designing for democracy, and it examined the current proposals to eliminate the House of Lords and replace it with a Senate for the regions. Although we were given some sites to choose from, there was an option to propose a site, and I decided on the GNR warehouses here in Nottingham, which is just across the street. The boundary outlined is where my proposal is. So the site is located here in the Island Quarter, which is surrounded by communities that date back to the early 19th century. And having gone through several industrial stages of development and proposals over the years, my proposal not only looks at a building intervention, but also an ecological intervention, which will ensure that the needs and desires of the local community are at the forefront. This could bring the local community into dialogue with the larger communities throughout the UK. For those of you who are familiar with the site, you know that the conditions are, well, as you can see, these are the conditions of the site currently. We did a study trip down to this site in 2019, and we actually were able to get onto the site. We're not really allowed to get on there now, but looking at the images, you can see that on the inside, especially in the GNR warehouse building, it's overrun with greenery. It's overgrown right now with vegetation. So the physical conditions of the site and its natural processes provide opportunities to create new as well as old ecologies, while promoting ways to cope with the emerging climate emergency and indulge in the requirements of the evolving natural systems and its cohabiting urban systems. So I did some observational sketches while I was there, and as you can see, the site is basically falling apart. It's covered in graffiti, overrun with vegetation. Through research, I was able to find a basic plan of the site to generate a model to show the context around the site. And there is an existing site grid with, the site is basically held up by steel. My design inspiration, basically, there are several factors that inspired my design. A few of them were my interest in people-focused design, sustainability, and biophilic design, and also designing for well-being and social sustainability. So one of the things that really pushed it was when I did my dissertation, which was focused on greening infrastructure to support the well-being of the students within the studio. The case study and the focus group were the design studio and the architecture students who use it daily. And the feedback that was received from the focus group was that after we introduced the greenery within the studio, there was a noticeable difference in how they felt coming into the studio every day. They were more motivated to come in and spend time in the studio as opposed to being in a room where they weren't able to really see much greenery or being surrounded by any greenery. And also we did some research on parliaments across Europe. We did an anthology. Page 82 is my research that I did on the Greek Parliament. We did drawings of it, so we can have a better understanding of what the space would be, what a debating chamber would entail. So it would influence how it can influence my design. And from doing that research, we had to design our own chamber, and this was my initial debating chamber that I did. So this chamber was based on the concepts of openness and transparency and symbolizing the inclusion of the people. So the tall windows would serve as an example of the openness to the public, and the tree-like structures were motivation from the old customs of people who would gather under the tree in the early days to discuss and resolve community matters, which fosters inclusivity in the community. So from this, I knew that I wanted my debating chamber to not really just be enclosed within a building, but I wanted it to be a pavilion. And for comparative room scale and program, we use the Welsh Assembly. So my design development, my initial design, having the pavilion, my existing pavilion, being surrounded with the different spaces that I wanted to have for the entire scheme. And after doing it that way, I realized, okay, no, I really didn't want to have it within the building itself. So I proposed to have it separated from the building and utilize the buildings that were already on site to house everything else that I needed for the scheme. So as you can see, there are different changes in terms of the roof type, the roof structures, as well as creating connections between the buildings, and also testing materiality. So for opportunities and strategies, I looked at the access strategy. I didn't want the site to have a lot of vehicular access because there's a lot of traffic that goes around the site anyway. So I wanted to limit the amount of vehicles that would enter the site. So the only vehicular access would be for taxis, maybe shuttle services. We'd have cyclists and pedestrians, deliveries and waste collection, and that would be the only thing that's running through the site. And sustainability considerations would be the growing areas, not only for ecology, but also for social sustainability of the community, because everyone from the community can use the northern part of the site, so they can come and you have the parks where the communities can come, the families can come together. You have the growing areas where the community can also help out in terms of, helping with what grows on the site. There's a greenhouse that is also served for the site and the community. And there is rainwater collection, so we have the pitched roofs for that, the new landscaping, and introducing a river channel. Daylighting strategies would be to utilize all the tall windows on the site, opening them up, making them a bit wider, and introducing roof lights. For cooling strategies, the introduced river channel, would be a means of cooling the site, especially during the summer months, and the trees also provide cooling and shading. And for the structural strategy, the idea is to propose retrofitting glulam and timber structures within the building itself that can later on be removed and reused if needed. So as you can see, the glulam structures are fitted in. They would be attached to the walls, and they'll be doweled. And this is an example of how the dowels would work for the different joints. So you use the mortise and tenon joint. I think the Humberton Hall in Cambridge, I think, used the same ideas. So that was a precedent that I used for the ideas for that. So my proposal, there's a site montage of what the building would look like on site, and how it would look in context with all the introduced greenery and vegetation around it. And for the site plan with context, you see the growing areas towards the north. The entire northern part of the site is absolutely public, open to the public, while the southern part of the site, which would be a more private area where the debating would happen, it's a bit more closed off, and you'll probably need some security access to get through to the other side, but it's also surrounded by gardens and greenery. And on the entire ground level, you'll have the office spaces, which is the building towards this side. The office spaces is a mixed-use aspect of it, where on the ground level you have the offices, and on the upper level you'll have residential spaces for the members of parliament. You have the greenhouse, you have the lobby, you have the library, and the debating chamber. We have the section that goes through the entire site that shows the connections of how the building, how the design connects together right through to the water channel. And in terms of materiality, I chose to have locally sourced materials. So you'll have stone floors, and you'll use timber and glulam for the existing structure. And here in the visuals, you'll see the lobby space, which is also a social space. It connects to the chamber, so the members of parliament have to walk through the lobby, and this gives them a chance to interact with the members of the public. So there's opportunities for them to actually speak to them on an informal level, as opposed to having to make an appointment and visit them in an office. They actually interact with the public regularly. And the debating chamber on the inside is open, it's airy, it's light. You have views looking out, so it makes the space more enjoyable. You have a Senate library where the public can also access. And to the right, you have the atrium and with the accommodations and the offices. So as I said earlier, the offices are on the ground level and the accommodations are above. So this is a reception area which shows the integration of the old and the new materials. So the existing steel structure is there, updated with the introduced timber materials and the brick materials. And this is the facade showing the different materials and how they connect together. So you'll have the existing updated brick, which you'd see the gray patch, which would be the parts that are filled in for the broken areas, and the timber structure attachment showing the connections between the buildings. And this shows how the chamber connects also connects to the existing buildings and the facade of the balconies that would look over into the gardens and into the northern space. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting and really informative, and yes, bang on site. To the panel, any initial comments and questions?
I thought it's a really great scheme, Zana.
Thank you.
I just wonder how you feel that the makeup of your People's Parliament would differ from the House of Lords. You didn't really explain that. I mean, would there be a different kind of feel to how the debates happened, and how would you choose the people who were in it?
Well, I visited the House of Lords, and I must say it was quite dark. It wasn't, to me, it wasn't very inviting and welcoming. And I wanted this space to be a welcoming space for the public. I wanted them to feel like they are a part of something and not just excluded. Because usually what happens in Parliament, everyone makes the decisions and then we're told about it after. So I wanted the community to be able to have that interaction with them, and the decisions are made as a community and not just the MPs making it and we just have to deal with it after. Which is why I had the lobby especially. You can't hide from the public. You have to walk through the lobby to get to them, and you have to speak to them. You have to interact with them. So that's kind of what makes it a bit different.
I love the way you draw an analogy between light and accessibility. I was reminded of when you discussed the tree. The discussions that would take place under a large tree in a community. Yeah. And I saw, maybe this is a comment, not a question, but in one of your sections you showed how the Parliament sort of goes underground. It doesn't really, it's permeable in a way that it doesn't go above ground, so there is access on the ground level, and then you go down into that session. Initially, I thought I'd ask this question: how do you then draw a parallel between the kind of community gathering under a tree and that Parliament? Because I would think of that space as something that can grow with the number of people. You could have a bigger gathering rather than a set number of people coming to a specific room. Yeah. That would be expected in the House of Lords, for example. You wouldn't have 200 people show up if you have space for 100. Yeah. And I thought maybe with technology you would use that would enable you to expand that space. For example, when you want to watch a match, you can take that space outside the stadia and expand on the capacity of people who can observe the proceedings of the match or the of the parliament in your case. But very refreshing. I really enjoyed the project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, what I really liked actually was the your structural thinking and the way that created identities in these different aspects of your scheme. Well, that was very compelling.
Thank you.
Did you look into sort of participatory deliberative processes, so like the Citizens' Assembly, or like a lot of activist groups run something called a People's Assembly, which is like an informal structure for deliberating. I'm wondering if that's something that you're kind of interested in.
To be honest, before I did this project, I had absolutely no interest in politics. So it was still a learning process for me, going through everything and researching everything. And I think after doing my research, I think the Welsh Parliament was the one that I found most interesting in the way that they tried to involve the community. They allow the community to use the building other than just for the debates. So they come and they use the space to have their cafes and everything. So I think, yeah, it would be something that I think I would love to see happen in the future, and not just, as I said, as everything that we've seen so far is just, come in that room, you just do what you have to do and you leave. So I would like to have that community engagement. I'd like to see that community engagement going forward.
Thank you. Great comments from the panel. One final question. We have Pavlos, our resident politician, ready for you.
Well, I thought it's important to us to, obviously say something on this. So I've been reading a book recently because I was thinking about doing some postgraduate work, but it didn't really happen. But the book was very interesting, so I'm sure you'll enjoy reading it. It's called The Production of Space by Henry Lefebvre. It was written back in the 1970s.
Okay.
Now, he said social space is a social product. And I'm just looking at your idea in terms of linking politicians with the public in that kind of spatial way, and how materiality can actually be radical in the sense of encouraging more democratic kind of relations. And I'm thinking about a space that can actually, create a different kind of equality, if you like, between those who represent, others, and actually encourage them to meet them in that sort of way. So I think that's a very strong feature of it. I mean, I like the fact that it's very green, because the island quarter is supposed to have a green corridor as per the master plan, but that meets much more of our ambitions in terms of biodiversity, green space, and so on.
Yeah.
So well done on your work. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.